So, I want to tell the audience a little bit why you're on the show again. It's kind of basically had many episodes since the last time you were on that I think you probably have lots of things to say about. TOC, Jewish culture, maybe just those two categories. But of course, I want to leave it up to you to comment on whatever you think you have comments about. So, so what do you think? What did you watch?
Judaism and culture, and these are topics I quite like. I am a TOC guy, so quite a lot of my mind are according to this, but also Jewish. I learned when I was young much more about Judaism and the wisdom of the old people in Judaism. So, and
I want to say one more thing for the audience. Your profession right now, your work, and I don't want to butcher it, but it's related to business and culture. You're trying to improve culture.
Culture is culture is one of the issues that we need to look at. Okay. Generally speaking, I am an expert in management, which is a whole challenge of taking a group of people, maybe very large, but getting generating quite a lot of value. And how can we create even more value? And value, I look at it that this is not necessarily true all the time, of course, but if someone buys something from me, probably there is a value in it. And I can look on how much I got paid as a value that I have created. And this client was ready to pay for it. Again, it's not one-to-one, but if you look on the general thing, if this is not just one client and maybe I've cheated him or something like this, but if it is quite a lot of demand from what I do is beneficial and gives value. This is my basic assumption. And with this assumption, we can try to think what limits us in doing so and something like this. But thinking is pretty much organized in a kind of a way. My bachelor degree was in mathematics. And by the way, for me, mathematics is actually philosophy.
I've said that before.
Yes, it is a philosophy. It's not a science, even though it is a critical tool for most of the sciences. So it is needed and widely used, but mathematics in itself is not interested in the rules of the real world.
Yeah, not really. Yeah, most of math, well, I don't know if that's accurate most, but a big chunk of math that has been invented was invented without having an application in physics or anywhere else in the universe. And then later, oftentimes, physicists will look for new math like that and find a place for it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, but the math itself is built, you can take some axioms, you choose them as you want, and we don't argue whether they are real or not, whether they exist in reality or not. And from now on, you use certain tools of logic to understand more what does it mean, and you create a whole system around these axioms.
Yeah, it's saying if XYZ is true, then what can we conclude about ABC? And yes, that is what we do in science a lot. And we often, while we're doing it, of course, we recognize we may be wrong about these assumptions, which we probably will check later. But within the framework of
in math, I don't ask about the initial axioms, whether they really apply in reality or not. From my point of view, I can start with something that is no reference to reality, like those who created, ask the question, suppose that the root of -1, there is something like this, the root of -1. We don't know, it does not have any meaning in real life.
Imaginary numbers.
Imaginary numbers, and a whole thing was created, and then suddenly the physics, certainly of electricity, has found out, hey, it's very useful, it makes our life much easier.
You know, I actually didn't study imaginary numbers. I did a lot of math because I studied physics.
Sure.
And I had the option to take imaginary numbers class, and I chose not to. I thought it's not going to be applicable anywhere. Are you saying they found an application in physics?
Yes, I mean, the way I studied electricity, you know, when you have, how you call it, when the voltage changes all the time.
Alternating current?
Yeah, okay. Yes. Alternating voltage again.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the electricity we use in daily life. And how you refer to it mathematically, I mean, at first I studied with sinus and cosinus and all those tools which make it so sort of looking very expensive and not very easy to maneuver. But then they say, okay, let us assume that real numbers are the x-axis and y-axis are the imaginary part. And then suddenly what was so complicated become easy to see and to do all kinds of exercises to understand what happens here and what happens here, and to compare it and to took the energy that is created, everything.
I'd like to add one thing in support of your comment you just made. Isaac Newton, who actually did really good work in math. He invented or discovered calculus. He's also known as the father of numerical methods, if I understand correctly. The first numerical method is called Newton's method. And one of the things he talked about, which Ellie Goldratt also talks about, which I think is a pretty core part of TOC. EG said that too, not just me. Newton talked about systems of parts, okay? And he described many kinds of systems of parts, and he didn't care that some of them don't exist in reality. And what it was, when you have a system where the parts are not dependent on each other at all, that's a system you can imagine, and it doesn't exist in reality. In reality, we have systems where the parts are interdependent, and then you can talk about constraints and Pareto principle and all that stuff. So,
yes,
that's pretty amazing.
Sometimes I feel that people do not fully understand, especially dependent and independent things properly. But again, mathematics, I think, is an enabler, but in itself is philosophy. It takes logic into very, very deep level. Now, can you see that if I now look on the Talmud or Gemara, those names are about synonyms, in which this describes books of wisdom, Jewish books that were written, let us say, 2,000 years ago about, and it is all discussions between the clever people of that time, and they were extremely clever, and they are using sort of mathematics, which means there are certain axioms, like there is God, and God gave us the Bible in Mount Sinai. This is something you don't argue with. This you have to accept. And maybe there are some other, my point was when I understood mathematics and I reflected on what I've learned and started to see things, but I could not go back to really see. But there were rules of how you make some reasons. For instance, there is an axiom. Because the Bible was not written by man, but by God, God would not repeat himself unless there is a reason that is beyond.
Okay. So that
And
makes
then,
a person who's studying that book, if he notices repetition, to also say, wait, there isn't repetition. Let me look deeper.
absolutely, you need to say deeper. There is a much, much, much deeper message there. Again, it is an axiom. Axiom, if there is we don't expect God to do some repetition. You already said it. Why you said it twice? Now, there is something in the Bible that say, don't cook the baby of the sheep with the milk of his mother.
What does that mean? Tell us.
It took something that looks like there is some ethics to animals in which you don't take the baby of the animal and you boil it with the milk of his mother.
So is it trying to teach us to be nice to animals? Is that what?
Okay. First, you might think so, but this simple sentence, at least in Hebrew, it looks relatively simple. I is the one who cannot fully translate it, but this appears 3 times. And because of those 3 times, there are kosher rules. They speak in one meal, you should not eat meat and milk. Anything done from meat with anything
The lesson was don't eat meat and milk. Okay.
Yes, and there need to be a separation of time, which means if now I have eaten meat in lunch, the next time I'm allowed to take milk or anything that is made of milk, will be at least 6 hours. How they derived it? Because all these are derivatives from a simple sentence that it is not so straightforward to understand it because it looks on something that looks a little bit ridiculous. I mean, first of all, usually we don't cook with milk and.
Well, I'll say in the past, I'm going to take a educated guess that people spoke in metaphors in the past a lot more than today.
First of all,
yes. A lot more literally.
Yes. Today. I just like to show to you, they could not ask the question, maybe God repeated it 3 times. They needed to go much, 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 much deeper. How all this developed, I didn't see the discussion, but it comes from huge amount of discussions until this kind of assumptions that this is it. And actually, this kind of discussion, first of all, you read it and you wondered at one time whether what did they know or didn't know about the Greek wisdom.
The Jews.
I don't know what they knew. I think they knew something, but they were not going into the same objectives. They somehow did not try to look whether the Earth is rotating around the sun or the other way around. This was not trying to show the laws of nature was not their objective. Their objective was what are the rules according to which you should live?
So they cared about morality, and I think what you're saying is the ancient Greeks were caring more about nature.
Probably. And because of this, there was no direct, I believe, direct connection. But to me, it looks like that the really wise people of that time were at about similar league in general wisdom as the Greek. At about the same time, again, plus minus 200 years, maybe here and there. But this is a huge work of wisdom. But you need to understand the situation. I mean, what they take is an axiom, but outside of the axiom, questions are actually even invited. Okay, you should ask yourself questions. On the Bible that is called the Torah, the 5 books of the key Bible, you are allowed to ask questions. You are not allowed to challenge the existence of God. I mean, okay.
Well, what would happen if you did? If you said, how do you know there's a God? What would the teacher say?
Then they will look at you as you have gone crazy or mad or...
So they don't actually philosophize about that question.
They
Or at least most
philosophize about what might bring you to such kind of a disbelief. But
they're theorizing about my mental illness for not believing it.
You are going to be bad. Okay. Look, religion is a religion, but wisdom is something a little bit different, whether it is under religion or outside religion. Which is because if you ask a question, how come, kind of a wonder, that relatively many Jews, mainly from Europe, made so much contribution to at least to the Western world, quite a lot of it coming from here. First of all, because at least in the Bible, it's written, the parents are responsible for the education of their children. Which means it's not nice. It is, you need to. It's your responsibility. Under this kind of culture, can you understand Jews that lived in Europe? They were pretty much suffering in Europe because there were quite a lot of rules against them. Many times they were really actually thrown away, go somewhere else, not just from Spain, but also from some other countries, depending on exactly on the time.
Yeah, that's really weird. They had a lot of oppression in Europe despite doing so well in Europe.
Yes, in which, if we speak about, let us say, it's called Eastern Jews, but many of them are not from the East, they are from North Africa, or at least their origin comes from North Africa. But there they were much less, they suffered much less. They were not equal. And this kind of, if you speak about the Islam, the Islam was relatively, most of the time, tolerant to Jews.
Okay. I don't know.
No, this is probably a fact. I mean, I'm not a historian to tell you exactly at what.
If I was going to take a wild guess, I would say the Muslim majority countries, which were at the time being led by individuals that have to be Muslim, but maybe were very liberal. Maybe in those times, Jews were doing okay.
No. I think it's more even in the Quran, in the Islam itself. Muhammad tried to buy in also the Jews. And the Jews did not accept it, so it was half and half. Part was a little bit angry on the Jews who did not fully go with him, but also part of the Islam is more in line with Judaism in many ways.
Sure. Because they copied a bunch of things, but okay.
Yes, and so and there are all kinds of rules in the Islam, which I mean, I've seen it. I mean, I never studied Islam, but it was really when I grew up. It was talking most of the Islam at the time were very tolerant to Jews. This is not the situation today, of course. I'd like to say is that even in the old time, in many of the Muslim countries, Jews were respected.
Like the rest of the world, but then also hated on when they, in my view, like when they did too well.
This is again more the 20th century.
Okay.
Because what I hear, for instance, in Morocco, etc., Jews were very respected in the vast majority of the time.
Pretty sure you're talking well before 1948.
Yes, I would say that this made a big change, but also when Zionists started to come to Israel, and there were still not so many, by the way, Arabs in the Israel, they, of course, looked with some kind of hostility, and there were all kinds of things happening there, but I really speak about the 20th century.
Previous to 1948. And the reason I mentioned that date is,
of course,
afterwards, in the few decades afterwards, 800,000 Jews in the Arab world left from persecution.
I don't know if persecution or they were allowed to. Some of them were under persecution, some not. But they were already a country to go to, so people suddenly came from Yemen. I don't know at what point the authorities allowed them to. I mean, what happened? But something happened, because after 48, they did not go, and then suddenly they did. And so happened in Morocco, and so happened in Iraq. So at certain time, Jews were, maybe in a way they were pushed out, but not all that much. But in other countries, it depends. But again, I'm saying if I take much earlier, and look for yourself, if we speak about the Islam, of course, within Muhammad time and somewhat after, they were very aggressive in Spain, aggressive in other places in which to put the rule of the Islam in. What came someone later was relatively tolerant Islam. Not many wars with Europe or with others. It was not aggressive. They did not prosecute the Jews in the vast majority of them. I don't say they did. They made some kind of difference between what Jews are allowed to do. Not everything, okay?
And to be clear, not just Jews. They lumped the Muslims, or at least the Islamic law, lumps Jews and Christians together. And here's the point: non-Jews and non-Christians are supposed to be killed. You guys are allowed to live.
Yes,
but you have to pay a tax that Muslims don't have to pay.
Maybe, yes, probably in some, but also Jews were respected. So there were several clever Jews who were employed actually by the ruler, and with a lot of influence. If I speak about one of the most cleverest Jews ever, the Rambam, he was somehow in what is known today Saudi Arabia. and he was a doctor for that time.
What century are we talking about? It's all right.
Well, it was the Rambam lived somewhere from 1135 to 1204, which means this is the 11th century.
500 years after Islam started, something like that.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So sorry that I don't know
All right.
things like
It just
this
helps me to know
by
the
heart.
period a little bit.
Not by heart. There were, of course, many others. So the Rambam was relatively rich because he was so highly recognized by the authorities of the time, helping them with all kinds of things. But please see, the basic duty of a Jew to educate his children, it went to both. And what you see in history is in too many times the Jews were clearly the most educated people. But if you compare Europe with North Africa, well, there is a difference. There is a difference what education could someone in Morocco get, not just a Jew, even not a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
And in Europe, I mean, after the Renaissance and so, suddenly there were many opportunities. And something else that happened, because the Jews was a minority that sometimes were getting more tolerant behavior and sometimes very rough, many of them were kind of the move, certainly in Europe. So Jews were partially used to be on the move. So they came to a city. If the situation was okay, they may stay. If not, they may go. And many things they were not allowed, like to buy a land, was totally forbidden throughout Europe.
So they were sort of forced. This is what I read. They were sort of forced into some economic trade because they're not allowed in the rest of them, and those are things like banking.
But now see the attitude. The attitude was, and there is a kind of saying in Hebrew, old kind of saying, if it is not me helping myself, who will? Sort of. Which means it takes it. I am in a trouble. I need to go out of the trouble. If someone helps me, great. But it's not just that I'm sitting and waiting that someone else will help me.
Yeah, the term that Americans use, individual responsibility.
We are responsible for ourselves. So we will take the responsibility. My mother told me many times, because of the stories about her family, in which most of them are new, but not her father and also not her mother. They were killed by the Nazis. But she was telling me, look, so with my family, we had very good times and we had very rough times. And we were 7 children, which practically means that there need to be some priorities. That sometimes we can get more, sometimes less. And top priority was to stay alive. Okay? Next priority, educate the children. Very clearly, very announcedly. This was before so many other things. So many other things. Good food, good home, warm. I mean, first of all, educate the children. The children needs to have educated. Maybe in the original sense, this was educated in Judaism. But then Jews learned, okay, not all. I mean, there's some very clever non-Jewish, so we could also learn what they know. And this was probably my guess. How come that from people who were partially or wholly leaving Judaism, but what they got was already the two things: the idea of education and the idea that you need to help yourself. You are the one you can rely on.
I would probably say
Eh,
they got thousands of little things too. As an example, my understanding of all of this, for a culture to become what it is, and for a person to become what they are, a really great person or a really great culture, the only way that can happen is if the parenting knowledge is transferring well from parent to child, which means parenting is very good. Part of parenting is you're not beating the shit out of your kids. You're not turning them into, you're not scaring the crap out of them. You're not, you know, even in the context of education, when I was 10 years old, I was in a Muslim school in Los Angeles. Okay, this is in America. I'm pretty sure at the time it was illegal to beat kids in a school, but I was swaddled with a big stick.
so were many Jewish
Yeah,
children.
yeah,
They were beaten,
yeah.
but they were beaten in order that they will learn. So you can, sorry, but you can still see kind of the thing when you are allowed and when not. There were certain rules about it. I'm not trying to justify anything, okay? Just trying to understand the situation. And something else that, because of those two, I think, tendencies, one is really value education and the responsibility of the parents to have their children educated. And
As opposed to leaving it to the government to do it,
yes,
which
and
is what a lot
then,
of the opinion is in America. The government and the
okay,
teachers are the parents.
no, so in Judaism, the parents are responsible. Government helps you, great. Take the help of the government, of course, but it is still my responsibility.
First,
I
yes.
need to see that this is done in the best way possible because this is the way for my child. So this certainly also makes the whole connection between parents and child very, very, very strong. When I can see now in days of war between us and Arabs, I think I have no doubt how much the Arab parents love their children. But the kind of responsibility between what I see in Jews, including Jews are atheists.
Well, to be clear, even conceptions of love are different across people. Okay, so
Quite,
yeah,
quite.
and I just wanted to add a small point. The point I was trying to make earlier was my guess, my educated guess about parenting in by parents that have Jewish culture is that they're kinder than in general other parents. That was it. I wasn't saying there's nobody that beats their kids. Just in general, they are kinder, um, more
I,
loving.
I assume they're very loving, but still they could be very pedant. And they think it is helping. Whether it's helping or not is another discussion. To be very pedant parent that really looks to you that you need to learn, you need to learn. How many hours did you learn today? Did you finish all your homework? Beware not to do all your homework. So it coming from goodwill, okay? Not always the best way, but at least this, I think this was throughout. When I was 10 years old, we had a maid. They were Jews, but they came from sometime in North Africa. They were very poor. And the lady who was our cleaner, and we loved her very much. She was very intelligent, but she did not know to read and write. But in her mind, it was so important to give education to her children. and she had a daughter that was pretty good in school, but in mathematics she had very difficulties. So this maid who came, I don't know, twice a week or so to our home, she asked me, I don't know how much I was,
Helpful.
14, 15, relatively good in mathematics.
Okay.
Can I give lessons to her daughter? Which I did very gladly. I hope I helped her. I don't know.
Your first time as a teacher.
Yes, but I also remember that I had a very important insight regarding mathematics and why so many people
have trouble with it.
Are bad in mathematics. Let us say that. This is because, first of all, it's also I learned it directly from my mother, because I was seeing a question in mathematics, and immediately I told my mother that I don't know how to solve it. And my mother said, hey, you just read the question. Sit down. Put what you know. What's the question ask you? What do you know?
Write down what you know. I say that so many times.
And suddenly there was a way, and suddenly it came to my mind that was not obvious to me before. Certainly it was not obvious to my pupil 2 or 3 years later, that to some people who are learning text, like history, like literature, that when they see the question, they already know whether they know to answer or not, at least if. They know most of the answers. They only need, to construct it in the best way. In maths, they ask you a question that you don't know. So now it's up to you to solve it. This is a transform of mind of how I take. And please see, this girl just saw a question and she got terrified because she does not have an answer. It's not 2 + 2 that she learned by heart that this is 4. Okay, this is easy, relatively. It's the same like reading a chapter and remember what was it all about, or maybe even cite it by heart. This is different. And suddenly when mathematics started, not just calculus, simple calculus in which there are clear rules, but you need to find a rule for something. Suddenly a new way, and you need to understand the situation in order to get it.
You're developing your process of thinking, which you then use for all thinking.
Yes, this is what is so important. And really, like you say, it teaches us to think in general, not just for mathematics, but to see a situation and see how you deal with this situation.
Well, the way, one big problem, why people are scared of math or hate math, or however you want to describe it, why they don't love math. Part of it is no one's explaining why it's good, why they liked it in the first place, why are they putting it in school, why is it every year that we have to learn math. No one's ever explaining that stuff. The years, I always enjoyed math the whole time of my school experience, but the times that I enjoyed math the most was when the teacher was really excited about it. So part of it is I'm getting excitement from their excitement. I forgot what my point was there.
No, the point was that suddenly you are getting what I call an insight. Suddenly you got an insight, and the teacher gets is happy because of the insight. He transformed not just what we do in this case. It has so many more applications. If you're coming to understand this relationship between this, and this. So there is something great.
I remember one instance. This doesn't matter to our episode, but I remember one instance in college. I think it was linear algebra. It might have been another. Yeah, I think it was linear algebra. where the teacher at one point was explaining a proof of why 0 equals 0. That sounds weird. I thought it was weird. And he was so excited. He couldn't contain himself. He was almost jumping off the floor explaining it. And that got into me too. I didn't really understand why this mattered so much, but things like that happened to me afterwards with different ideas.
Yes.
But yeah, I love to have seen that from him.
Yes, but there is a basic enthusiasm from a new insight, even if the new insight will not change your life. Okay. Okay. No. But there is something in it. I didn't know it before. Now I know it. I think many people like us, we love it. I think there is kind of a value to it. And you can see it also in the Gemara, like I told you, because they dealt and suddenly they get an insight and they are simply very enthusiastic about what suddenly came out.
So I would say more than just, I mean, the way you described it was Jewish parents are, they care about education. They believe it's their responsibility to teach their kids. But I wonder if there's another element of they're trying to get their kids to love education. Is that the same thing?
I don't know if it is the same thing, but certainly they can see the insight that if you love education, you're probably going to do much better than if you don't like it.
And what I think is happening in a lot of cases is, even if the parent is, well, I think the parent has to have a love for education also. I think if they had a hate for education, it's likely the kid is going to have it too, unless something else happened.
Goldratt also looked to it because he looked also to TUC in education. And part of what he said is you need to somehow convince the pupil that to see the value of what you're trying to give him. So if the math
to create consent,
he'd say, why do I need to know it? Somehow you need to, and if you taught him geography,
you have to see how it connects to all the ideas that are already in your head. If you can't see how it connects, then you can't put it in. It doesn't stay.
So why history is important to us also. And too many teachers don't do that. And those who do to see the beauty, this is great. I had a great teacher for the Bible. Here I mean the overall Bible. I mean including all the other books that are included, because he was speaking about a prophet. Okay? So just reading what Yirmiyahu, what I call Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah or Jeshaiah, I'm not sure how you say those names in English. They were some of the most important ones. And he looked on how they made their speech to try to impact. So it's not just what they say, how they say, why they stress this point, and then this point, and then this point. So he actually taught it like it is great literature. And he convinces us, the pupils, and we were quite a bunch of pupils who did doubt almost everything, including religion, even though we were in religious school, but some of us were already with non-religious ideas. But he convinces us that this is kind of art in itself. It's clear what he wants to get. Okay? He wants to achieve that the unwilling people to do the good should do the good.
I wonder if you're trying to say, or also trying to say that even for somebody who doesn't believe in God, there's lessons to learn in those books. Is that part of what you're saying? Is that what he was saying?
Quite a lot, because you can also see the psychology, the story itself, the conflict within, the conflict of the prophet, because the prophet would like to succeed. He would like to convince that you should
Act morally.
should repent from what you did and start to do the good. And he would like. It's difficult. So how you try at least to achieve it. And so why should we remember him, this prophet, more 3,000 years afterwards? Why? Because so much power in it. And I can see the power, and I can really, actually, this power that I have recognized, still recognized today, is what was my own difficulty to become I don't call myself atheist, but I'm not religious. Which again, I dispute the axioms of the big wise people of the past. Because,
well, not necessarily all of them. I mean, the point is you're willing to look at what they say, see what's the good in it, but you're also willing to see what's wrong.
yes, in which, first of all, I'm saying I don't believe that God gave the Bible to Moses on Mount Sinai. I don't believe it. Why? I have my reasons, etc., but this is not the point. I'm challenging the basic axiom. Personally, I don't say whether I believe in God or not, because if it was not God who gave us these books, so there were people. So now I don't care whether there is God or not, because this is just trying to understand kind of nature. Is there something above the nature that we see and understand that somehow playing the overall game or not? I cannot answer this question.
I'd like to add my view to this for the audience who just heard yours. What was my point? Oh no, I just lost it now because I went somewhere else now.
The point about whether there is God or not. Do we
believe? Yes. So I say very often, and really I ask a question first. Why does it matter if there's a God or not? I don't really get a good answer. And my answer to that is, well, it doesn't matter, because the truth of what's moral or not, we can figure it out. You know, there's a logic to it. There has to be a logic to it. And we can figure out the logic. And that logic would be true if there's a God, and the logic would be true if there's not a God.
If you speak about ethics, maybe there could be a difference. I, again, don't think so. But this is, I believe, not a trivial question. Because if there is no God, why you are so ethical? Depends on... you can do what's good for you, and that's it. You can murder as long as you are not getting caught. Why not?
Oh, I don't agree that's ethical.
Okay. Okay. I mean,
that's similar to saying I played the lottery and I won, therefore it was a good decision.
No, this is for me, this is stupid. But this is part of the things that I think that ignorance of mathematics and ignorance of uncertainty is so problematic. Certainly in managing organization, I think
the person who thinks he's not going to get caught after committing a crime, I don't think they're looking at statistics very much.
Look, if we
the ways they can get caught, they're not thinking about
it. Look, if you have a discussion with someone who is very religious, I don't care what religion, any religion, and he will try to convince you, one of the things is based on what is your ethics? Based on what? You are you. why not getting everything that you like, no matter what it does or not does to others? Is it just logic that is it just because you fear the police, or you have an
So that's
internal
the
rule
question. Are you
for
asking me for
yourself?
me to answer, or
I'm saying this is kind of a question. You need to answer it for yourself. I
sure?
think quite a lot of people like me who are not religious have very strong belief, yes, I am a creature that is still have some very strong ethical rules, and I don't need a God for them.
Yep.
Eventually, I think I am getting more because I'm ethical, because people know I am, because people believe me, because I'm not telling lies all over the place. So it's good for me. But generally speaking, I need to be, it's not just logic, it's beyond logic. This is kind of a basic wish of mine not to do bad.
I think that is part of logic, but yes, I get what you mean. It's the way I've been saying it is. Let me say it like this. There's I did an interview with a former ordained rabbi, Shalom, interviewed me, and one of the questions he asked me was, um, "What was the change you made?" Right before that, I had said he had asked me a question, and I couldn't remember something from a long time ago in my life. It was around the time 14 years ago when I had just become an ex-Muslim, or maybe it was before that. And I referred to myself as Gray Gandalf. Do you know the movie Lord of the Rings?
I don't think I've seen it. I know the name, of course. But,
So Gandalf was just a wizard, and there was this thing that happened to him where he went away to somewhere for 1,000 years and came back, but to the rest of the world it was only a short period. So they would ask him about that time from 1,000 years ago for him, and he would say, "I don't remember." So for me, that happens. I don't remember how I was 14 years ago very much. So he asked me, "What's the big change between your gray Gandalf and when you came back later as white Gandalf?" And I said, in the past, if somebody had asked me what's most important, or if somebody asked me what's my main feature, I would say, and I call this one thing: reason, logic, honesty. They're all the same. Rationality, they're all the same thing. Today, I don't say that. I say love and reason. And love is
okay.
like saying morality, okay, which is what you just said. How to
Yes.
act, what we should do.
Yes.
Morality and reason, yes.
Yes. Okay. I can accept it. We just call it a little bit different names.
Yes.
But it is based not on logic, but on what we want, uh, what we appreciate, why we live. Uh, Look, logic has its boundaries. If you were to stay only with your logic, you would do nothing.
Where
This
do you
is
put
known
intuition in this?
by research of the brain. That there is half of the brain that is logic, half of the brain that is much more emotion.
So where do you put intuition in this?
Okay, intuition is have to be kind of a mixture from my point of view. So maybe uh, if I lose my part of this, maybe I don't have intuition because it needs both somehow.
So the way I understand it is we're training our intuition to be logical.
Uh, Look, in order that I will have intuition, I need to get signals in the past of something that happened to me that I took into account. I noted it. It's not just something that I can easily forget. I made myself to at least note, and for this, I need logic. And from this I will get intuition eventually, the way I understand what intuition means. So basically, intuition is logic, but I did not put the whole thing into it. I've seen certain signals. It told me something.
Well, there can be some bad logic in there, and
Yes,
we,
it
we
could
can
be
retrain
also,
ourselves.
it could be bad logic because something happened to you, and if you don't understand the boundaries, you can take it too much or much too less. Like if you drive the car and there is you cross the railway, and do you go slower to look left and right before you cross, and how much? So intuition could be that once I did it and 10 seconds later there was a train, and I thought, oh, if I would be slower, this would disrupt me totally. But now I need to create some logical rule around it, around my new recognition about the risk of crossing the railway without looking. And what will be the rules? I should fully stop and only then go, or it's enough to go slower and look. What are the rules? And constructing the rules, I can do huge mistakes. Because one of my recognition, which I think is important, is asking what are the boundaries of every insight. Now, of course, I don't do it on every insight, and some of them are kind of intuitive insights that I did not fully.
And some of them have maybe fuzzy boundaries while you're talking about it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And
Absolutely.
you can make them less fuzzy later.
Yes, but maybe if I fall and then I go backwards, I think, I don't remember with whom I was, but did we speak about making a change and then going backwards because the change was not good?
Yes, and the way they made the change was doing a really large change and then removing the entire structure to the old one or to a new one.
Look, there is a difference. And I tell you where TOC suddenly comes in. Because in TOC, whenever I have a new idea, a new insight, that could bring me benefit, which means when I have a new insight, my first question is, okay, what is the benefit? What will I gain by employing this? Once I get a good answer, there is benefit, I need to ask myself, what are the negative branches? This is part of the vocabulary we use, but you can understand immediately what does it mean. If you do this, what bad thing will happen? And it very much, I like to compare it to a new medicine, okay? We already know when there is a new medicine, it should cure you from something, but it gives you new problems. And so at least this we must know. So I would say something like this. If I was in situation A and I made a change to B, and suddenly I don't like myself being in B, should I go back to A? Hey, Ellie, there were reasons why you moved from A to B, because there were certain benefits you wanted to get. Now think again how you get the benefits without the negatives.
Which and to explain to everyone, this is like saying you have a theory and you found a flaw with it. It doesn't mean you have to throw away the whole theory. You can theorize small changes to this theory and test each one of those.
Yes, I need to understand how come I got something that I did not expect to. And when I understand what happened, it could be just that you go a little bit out of the natural boundary or the boundaries that should have been. So the basic instant is still in place, but you already got when it does not apply in full, so change it. And without this thinking, we don't learn right. Because part of what they say, learn from experience, the big no, really, for me, is really if I had experience that something does not work, I just pull it out and do the vice versa. This is natural, and usually this is very wrong. Which means you need to go a little bit deeper in what really did not work according to the causality. What went wrong? This is where now I fully understand, and now I understand so much better my world and what can be done. I wrote about it quite a lot, about learning from surprises, I called it. But it actually learn from experience, but really trying to see, understand why I got the undesired effect or things that I got, and what I did not consider, and again going the whole way. If I change, what negative will happen? And until I do it, I could learn very bad.
So just to clarify for everyone, to explain to them what you're saying, let's explain the contrast. The contrast is some new thing happened, you were shocked by it, you don't understand why it happened, it's bad. And what the standard response that people are doing is, okay, I don't understand that, it's an anomaly, let's leave it here and ignore it. Or they do this, make a fake stupid reason about why that happened and put it in that box and category and continue on, which really means not changing any of your thinking, not improving any of your thinking, not really explaining why. Their standard reasoning for something going bad is that guy did something bad, let's fire him. I remember you telling me this many times.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. This is one of those things. Someone made it, let us fire him, he is no good. I mean, not just fire. Why should I fire him? Because he's no good. If he did this mistake, he's no good. Really? Let us ask some questions about it. Is he really not good? And why did you thought before that he is good? Because you hired him. And what other things he did, maybe were good or not, check again. You need to check it. You need to think about it. And when you do it, you are getting many more insights all the time. And you can really improve so much more.
It's the difference between scientific thinking and mythological thinking. Mythological thinking doesn't produce any wealth of knowledge. And if it does, it is by luck. Where with the scientific approach, it is not luck that's driving everything forward.
Yes, but again, scientists, or at least academic world, you see, when you do your PhD, you better choose something that would work. Because if I come with hypothesis, right? In order to do my PhD, I need some hypothesis to come up and say, I will check this hypothesis. And then I have to pray to God that the hypothesis is absolutely right and will bring huge results, right?
I
because
guess you're
then
saying
I will be highly appreciated and got my PhD very clearly, and then I'm destined to do real well.
I think I get what you mean. I think what you're saying is when a scientist makes a hypothesis and then the experiment rules it out, that's seen as a bad thing, which is stupid because it should be seen as a good thing. The only way we're going to find the right answer is if we theorize 100 wrong answers first, find out why they're wrong. Then we're eventually going to get to the right one. We're not going to find the right answer on the first try.
Yes, but quite. But this is something that needs to be taken, because the motivation in science, that when I started to do all my research, I need to have a positive result, and if I did not, I will make some changes of what I did and what I did not did, and will still publish it.
Oh, you mean cheating, lying?
Yes.
Falsifying the results?
I did not want to say it so clearly. Yes, this means cheating. And there are cheatings.
And it's destroying the value of the work. It's doing worse than that. It's, if any future scientist uses this experimental result for their work, it's potentially all of their work is ruined.
Absolutely. But if this, and please, this is because somehow we forget uncertainty. We forget that when one decides to really inquire about a hypothesis, there is uncertainty whether the hypothesis is right or wrong from the scientific point of view. Unless we have already checked it. This is something. Okay. If you take something new, you don't know. But then I'm trying to cut it. I'm trying to get to one side of the possibilities and not to the other side. I need to understand it, and people judging me need to understand my dilemma. So if they are blaming me, they may blame me because, look, Eli, with or without your experiment, it was clear that this hypothesis is not right because of this and this. It should have been ruled out much earlier. If they cannot, then, like you say, I added certain value. Because if not me, someone else had to do this, is to check this hypothesis, whether this is right or not. Or again, boundaries of how much it is right and how much not, because if we don't speak about physics, answers could be somewhat partial.
So we talked about a lot of different things, and I'm not really sure. It seems like we have no aim, but it seems like we're slowly aiming at something. I maybe not today, but maybe another time. I'd like to talk to you more directly about, and I don't even know if this makes sense, but more directly about Eli Goldratt's upbringing and the culture that he got. And the reason I care about it is I'm trying to better understand his invention, TOC, or how it can come about. I just love that kind of stuff. I love culture and early cultures too, and that's why I'm caring about early Jewish culture.
Yeah, of course, you can get my way of looking at it, but especially at him. And okay, good. This
just to bring up a thing, just to bring up one little thing that I don't really want to talk about a lot, but there's a thing I noticed that Richard Feynman talked about, and it's the same thing that Yevgeny told me when he met at that TOC conference. Okay, in the Richard Feynman case, it was they were trying to figure out what was wrong with the shuttle that crashed in the 70s. And one of the NASA people knew what was wrong, but she didn't want to tell anybody with her name because she, I don't know, feared getting fired.
Sure.
So she had to figure out a way to secretly give the information to Richard Feynman And then Richard Feynman had to figure out a way to secretly deliver the information publicly without letting anyone know it was her. This is not scientific thinking. This is a bunch of witch doctors.
Look,
and they're NASA scientists.
Look, scientific thinking cannot be out of the nature of people dealing with it. So if you look to something pure without any of the human weaknesses, it's up to you. But I don't know how.
Do you agree?
Eventually, the personality and the rules of our culture play a huge part. I'm now all in it. I'm trying to write a book together with a friend or so, really about it. Actually, my way is something very simple, kind of decision making. When I'm making decision for myself, this is one thing. If I am making decision for or as part of my duty as a manager in a company or a scientist in a team that had a very clear goal, they failed at that time, but it's still kind of the goal, is something very different. And when I make a decision, what I know about mathematics, I think helping me, but this is not the critical thing. The critical thing is human beings are aware that they are living in uncertainty. Some are understanding it a little bit more, some a little bit less, but they live. When you are either part of the team or part of a company, which is basically the same, you are part of an organization, the culture of the organization is very doing judgment after the fact and doing judgment on you all the time. So the fact that I know you we talk now for quite a time, but then suddenly you are making a mistake. Again, you mentioned this kind of situation. The reaction has to be done with a culture that does not allow such mistakes to be done, even though they are done all the time, but at many times people succeed to hide them. Several years ago, I don't know what we will talk next time, and from my point of view, you can also do quite a lot of editing. I would have done editing. So I can take part of this conversation and part of another conversation. But look, some years ago, the hospitals in Israel, a committee from all the Israeli hospitals came to the government with a request that inquiry that is done within the hospital should be kept in total secret and only judge in not in a lower level, but in a middle level or up would be able to open it. The reason is, if I'm a surgeon, there is a very good chance that I will kill somebody because of my mistake. Now, what do you mean a mistake? And what was my situation? How many hours did I sleep before the surgery?
They can die without any mistakes. You're just applying the best knowledge, medical knowledge we have today.
Yes, but then I like very much that there will be an inquiry that will say what exactly went wrong. And like I said, in too many times, you don't really know just because this happened.
Yeah.
You need to go on to see where the core of the mistake happened. It could be much before the patient died. But you see, if you're such kind of a doctor, you are dealing with death and life. This is your life, dealing with death and life, and you are not always right. And it is important that if somehow you made a wrong reasoning, but come on, many with your education could make the same mistake. It's so damned important that this will be spread. But if the lawyers of the diseased will hear about it, here we face a huge trouble. So we like to keep it secret, the analysis. I like that within the analysis that we find out whether this was kind of a mistake that a professional does from time to time, or because of the situation, or because of what we understand, how come that somebody knowledgeable and with your motivation like you could happen. So let us just understand, learn how much we can learn from it, and let go with it. There are some times in which you realize there was something that we cannot allow such kind of things. This actually proves you as a doctor, you really don't know the basics. I don't know how this happened, because then I would say how you are working in a hospital like this, etc. But this is already another question that will come later. And I think that other doctors know, and when they are making an inquiry, they try to get the benefits, but they're afraid of the negative consequences. That the hospital will be subject to a lawsuit, and all kinds of things that will happen to a very good doctor normally. But what can you do if you work for 50 years in life and death? You cause several deaths. I can tell you this, just based on probability, this is it. What can you do? So we need to find out this. And not allowing it is stupidity or ignorance, whatever is.
It's anti-scientific.
Yeah, okay. So, but even from science point of view, this is what I try to tell you. This is the nature of people. This is also part of science.
Yes, we
You
should
cannot
study
just
ourselves
say,
and people.
I'm a physicist, forget all kinds of feelings and emotions and culture and people.
Yeah, in an organization, we need to use our scientific thinking to understand people, things like ego, what's causing them to give a shit about ego, those kind of things.
Absolutely.
You need to understand
Yes.
psychology. It's part of science.
Yes, we need it, and it should go also to science, and it should go to the magazines that publish all kinds of research, and they try their best to put the good ones. But okay, you need to understand that you have created a situation in which some people will like to hide what really happened in the research. They would like to put the research in a very positive way. How do you neutralize this? Either with the culture that can understand failures as well as it really get excited from huge achievements, but truly understand failures, it's not easy. It is really not easy. I can see the huge difficulties in it. But I claim in order to be really good, you have to.
All right. Well, do you have anything else to add to this batch of content we just made before we get off here?
I think this is a good insight to say that you need definitely to learn from failures. But in order to learn from failures, you need to learn how to tolerate them in the right way. Because beneath a failure, there could be also some kind of achievement in scientific thinking, even though eventually it failed. But it was important, it showed the way, it proved something. We need really to appreciate it.
So for people watching, I'm going to link the article that Eli's talking about that he wrote on his blog. What's the title?
I don't remember.
Learning from failure.
Learning from surprises.
Surprises, yes.
Just one more sentence if you speak about it. Learn from surprises, because surprise is kind of the signal you get that somehow your assumption and paradigms in your head are not fully in line with reality. Otherwise, it would not be a surprise.
Yes, your intuition is surprised.
Okay, so I need to say, to look at it as kind of an opportunity to improve my basic assumptions.
I would like to be not surprised the next time that thing happens.
Yes, I would like, but if I am surprised, at least I like to get the benefit that I can improve. And
Yes,
the improvement could be more than just for this one incident.
Yes.
It could be
And I guess my point was
many other things.
My point was just to say, I don't want to be repeatedly surprised about the same thing for the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
Fix that.
Not always I know what do you mean by the same thing, because
That's
the same flow could happen in a different situation as well.
Very difficult to figure out, yes, whether two things are the same or different. Here's what's really weird. Every two things in the universe, every combination of two things are the same and different. Yes. They have some things that are the same and some things that are different. So then the differences or the sameness only matters to a particular problem we're looking at.
Yes.
Anyway, that might be confusing for people, whatever. It's too abstract. Maybe another time.
I think it's right.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Eli. And I'll be talking to you again about another episode. All right?
Okay. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.